Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Tamu Petra Brown, the creator of the Rare Transformational Leadership Framework. I am an organization transformation specialist and ecosystem builder. And of course, this podcast is designed to look at issues and factors that affect leaders who desire transformation and legacy uh, in the organizations, institutions, teams that they lead. Now, this episode is in the context of the Caribbean region, but of course, everyone is welcome to listen. I'm sure you'll find some gems. And I've titled this episode The Plantation Playbook: Why We Must Decolonize Caribbean Leadership. Interesting. So before we begin, I think it's going to be important to frame what decolonization is. And I do have a disclaimer. I am not a decolonization expert, academic, etc., right? And so I'd love some feedback from the scholars in the field. But I am a Caribbean national. I am living in a post-independence, post-colonial society, and I believe I have the right to speak on the lived experience as a leader in this space when it comes to the effects of colonization. So, colonization really is the dominant historical reality of Caribbean society, or as the plantation. So that is what colonialism was. And you have scholars like MacDonald and Branch who have shared that the plantation was a total institution. And that's important because the totality and all encompassing nature of colonialism is important in this discourse. And the plantation was characterized by rigid hierarchies, which we know, and routine surveillance. I'm being, kind with the words, but I'm gonna veer off into dialect. So we know that the plantation was made to degrade the enslaved, and we are the descendants of the enslaved, and that it was an entirely authoritarian system designed for the profit of the others, who, of course, were white people, right? Primarily from England and Europe. That's how the thing really go. And decolonization is really the attempt to dismantle structures, theories, frameworks, even sources of knowledge in order to create a true indigenous identity. And we're speaking in the Caribbean context. So, of course, although formal colonialism has ended, most of the nations in the Caribbean are independent. The psychological and administrative legacies of the plantation system and hence colonialism still exist. And I am positing today that we really might need to have a much more keen eye and intentionality around decolonization in governance and leadership at the micro level, which is at the level of the home, the level of the community, the level of the organization, and a more macro level at the level of national governance. So let's talk about my lived experience. And my lived experience is that of a consultant in the region, an educator for many years. And of course, I was a management of business lecturer, entrepreneurship lecturer, and I would have taught many of the theories and frameworks regarding organizational development, regarding leadership acumen, all the leadership theories, etc. No stranger to the colonization of knowledge when it comes to the way that we lead and the way that we manage. And we, even if we have textbooks written by Caribbean authors, the content of the text is still that of those of the North, the white man, right? So the not near them things are what we are teaching in our Caribbean schools, Caribbean universities, etc. So we're actually still within the system of colonialism, now moving into post-colonialism. And so although we have authorship, even me, I have business study guides, etc., the curricula that we are using to pen these guides as Caribbean authors and to pen these textbooks in the context of leadership and so many other areas of management, they still sit squarely in the northern domain, right? We are rarely, especially at the secondary and tertiary level, the community college level in particular, we are not exploring other knowledge, indigenous leadership frameworks and theory. And so we continue to educate, but we really continue to reinforce the leadership models that do not serve us, models that are not fit for community, for context, or for culture. Yeah. And that's a problem because as our people become more and more educated, they continue to reinforce the same colonial knowledge that should be revisited. So, colonial discourse or northern discourse and the attempt to benchmark and replicate theory and frameworks that are outside of our context, having been colonized and now post-independence, simply regurgitates and reinforces the same, right? So we're actually not shifting anything. It is these people that we educate, myself included, that come to organizations with this knowledge. And so what do we see? We see foreign organizational structures, right? We see the love for the foreign consultant. We see the hesitation to accept that indigenous knowledge and the lived experiences of our people have value. So we have outsourced our epistemic independence, right? So, in the Caribbean, we will say, if it come from foreign, it's better. And this is a fact, right? If it come from foreign, it better. If it come from the States, it better. If it come from Europe, it better, right? And this is reinforced. These are the people we see in our texts. These are the people we engage with. These are the people we sign MOUs with, which position us as inferior, and the other party as superior, because we come to the table with the posture that the northern, all that is northern, or all that is foreign, or all that is from abroad, or all that is from the north is best, not even better, is best. So we are discarding our people's knowledge. And because we are discarding our people's knowledge, we continue to be in a vortex of stunted innovation. Because even the idea of what innovation might mean, which is epistemology, really, is brought to us, or we have accepted what the North defines as epistemic, right? The North defines as innovation, sorry. And that is the ground for our knowledge or epistemology around innovation. And I'm speaking about innovation because this is a transformational leadership podcast, right? So let me pull all of this together in the context of leadership. So my rant above established that as we continue to educate our people in the region, we continue to educate them with the same theories and frameworks that serve others and that do not serve us. The outcome of that is that we create leadership ecosystems and governance frameworks, governance processes and systems that do not give room or make way for our realities. And our realities, particularly in the public sector or quasi-public sector space, is one of lack of specific types of human capacity required to innovate and transform. Our reality is significant resource limits. We're under-resourced, particularly in the public sector and the quasi-public sector. And the idea that we can mimic these leadership and organizational and management theories without, one, having the support systems that the colonial structures extracted from us, is like, as the young people say, it's delusional. So we want to implement what the North says is best. Yeah? We want to mimic the type of, if you're in education, programming that the North says is best. If you are in private sector, you want to mimic the organizational hierarchy that the North says is best. But you have none of the support systems that make these theories work or be effective. And so that really is delusional. And that is why we struggle so much when it comes to organizational transformation, because we are modeling a system for which we have 20%, I'm pulling that number out the air, of course, 20% of the resources to implement. Now, resources and support mechanisms are one thing, but culture is another, yeah? And so as we stick to this rigid hierarchical system, and we lose the value that our community, that our colleagues who are at the lower end of the hierarchy have to share their indigenous knowledge, we are also operating in a system where we actually do not have the right type of knowledge, data, and knowledge to make the best decisions. So we are often speaking about evidence-based decision making, and some data is required for transformation. But if the data is only held at the top and collected in the format and the systems that the North says is suitable, then we are making flawed decisions. Because the people with the most knowledge, through their experiences with the community, our experiences having grown up in our Caribbean region and our specific countries, if that is ignored, that type of information is ignored, but yet you are making decisions for the Caribbean reality, then really and truly, what is really the evidence and the data that you are using? Yeah. So there's really a dearth of data that is contextual, right? And because there is a dearth of data, because of the rigid hierarchical structures, and also what the top management might consider as important, because they're mimicking the North, then we've already lost the plot. So there's that, yeah? Now, let's talk briefly about why it is that there is little in transformation. And we see that, the public sector is not known to be transformative, although there are case studies, but these are outliers, which is why they are case studies, right? In the region. But, there can be no or very little transformation if we rely wholly on knowledge unfit for context and culture. There really can be no transformation if we other ourselves. I want you to take a minute with that. So we always talk about being othered, but in the Caribbean, we other ourselves. That's diabolical. There really can be no sustainable transformation if we insist on rigid hierarchy and there is no agile articulation. And agile articulation is one of the components of my REAR transformational leadership framework. So because of this lack of agile articulation, we never harness the knowledge of others because we are always looking up to the massa. Yeah. And up me not too. There can really be no meaningful transformation if we value control over collaboration and community. There really can be no meaningful transformation if every conversation is in the King's English. When I was growing up, we had the Queen, so we would say the Queen's English. So now the King's English, because as we all know in the Caribbean, the nuances of certain types of discussions can never be captured in standard English. We need our dialect to convey with effectiveness certain things. And sometimes it's not even the spoken word. Yeah? Elements of our communication The way we say, what? Really? What you say? What make? These are all forms of communication. But of course, there's a time and place for everything. But with our people in our organizations, we are still attempting to have our meetings, to have our stakeholder engagements in language that totally discards nuance because we are being so proper. And because of that as well, people can become intimidated to share the very data and information that we require for transformation because the meeting space has become too rigid, too hierarchical, and they begin to doubt the validity of what they have to share, which means we can never innovate because true innovation and true transformation is really more about engagement. What is it the people who you are innovating for, or the people who have to engage with the system that you are transforming? What is their want? You will never know because you would not engage with people outside the King's English. As a matter of fact, you have not even determined what transformation looks like in the context and culture of the organization that you lead. So this wasn't, the most articulate podcast because, it's kind of like a soapbox. I'm on my soapbox, as they would say, right? But the thought that I want to leave you with, or that we should ponder together, is that because of this colonial framework that we exist in the organization, right? Which is the new plantation, as we would say. Your role as a transformational leader who is attempting in his or her work or their work, right, to use decolonization as a leverage for organizational transformation. Your work will become extra lonely. You will be extra lonely. The work will become extremely tedious because it is impossible, really, for you to erase hundreds of years of social engineering in your organization. So you have to be satisfied with the dent that you can make and not be too judgmental of yourself, because if the truth is told, we are still enslaved. Visit tamobrown.com, hit that Let's Connect button on the website, and let's see how we can engage, have conversation, and work together around transformational leadership. Bye, everybody.